Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm bringing you a review for the brand new Netflix Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy Soundwave with Laserbeak and Ravage. All three of these figures are light to extensive retools of their Siege counterparts, and they all come together in this big $40 3-pack. They released alongside their Wave mate, Optimus Prime, with his two Battle Masters. And the whole point of this set is to give you Earth-based designs for these characters, since Siege gave a very alien take on all of them with, Laserbeak having that one cycloptic eye and Soundwave turning into a spaceship. So, yeah, Soundwave has been heavily retooled to restore his classic cassette tape mode. So that's going to be very exciting to get a look at. And overall, I think this is one of the most, if not the most, anticipated figures of the second wave of Netflix toys. So if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at the toy's packaging, we'll open it up, we'll see the instructions, and we'll see Soundwave and his two minions in both their alt modes, their robot modes. Naturally, be doing a lot of comparisons and group shots today. And then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So the trio come in your standard packaging for the Voyager 3-packs from Netflix. You see Soundwave right here taking up most of it, Laserbeak and Ravage on the side. Turn around, you get this very desaturated image of Soundwave with nice glowy yellow eyes, though as you can see his eyes are not yellow. Flip this around and you get the renders. And the Ravage and Laserbeak renders are pretty faithful to the final product. Soundwave has undergone quite a bit of change. The actual toy swaps out a lot of this lighter blue, as well as mostly yellow highlights, for a darker blue that's similar to the Siege toy and the G1 toy, and some more gold highlights, with the only thing really retaining the yellow being the cassette door there. He also, as you can see, was originally intended to have the yellow eyes, like the Siege toy, but they've since been changed to red. Now, honestly, I think that's a huge mistake. Not just because I personally prefer the yellow eyes on Soundwave. I would have been totally okay if they had done a cartoon colors version, where he's a lighter blue, kind of like this, with the bright red eyes. It would have worked. However, they gave him the G1 toy color palette with dark red eyes, and he kind of suffers the same issue that Earthrise Optimus does, in that you can barely see his eyes. It's not a good mix of colors here. So, bad choice in my opinion. Is it going to ruin the toy? No. Does it make it less appealing? I think overall, yeah. Commit to one way or another. Don't do a weird mix of the two that just clashes. But maybe I'm in the minority on that. Maybe you guys like the red eyes. I don't know. And then here is just the same side panel that we had for Optimus. Just that very black and white Earthrise side panel with the red mixed in for effect. And yeah, that's the packaging. Let's open these guys up now. Here are our instructions. And you get Soundwave up top, Laserbeak and Ravage on the bottom. Open this up. It's made of that same very thin, very flimsy paper that the Optimus instructions were. Not a fan. Anyway, you get first off your instructions for Soundwave's conversion from robot to cassette deck mode. Oops. And additionally shows you where to store his accessories on the back. And then the reverse side, you get Ravage and Laserbeak. They're very simple conversions. And a little how-to for how to actually have his cassettes interact with him. Which I think in the Siege Soundwave, they never actually showed that. They just showed you how to like plug stuff onto his arms. I could be wrong. It's been a while. Yeah. One thing they don't really show you here is how to combine his weapons. But because they are the same weapons that the Siege version has, you can make that big old like hammer looking thing. If you're so inclined. I'm really not. And now we have our characters in their respective alt modes. Soundwave, Ravage, Laserbeak. Now with the two cassettes, there's not a whole lot new to see here. It's all just different paint apps. Ravage here is done up with new tampos that mimic the original cassette design from the G1 Ravage. Even has the little thing that says Japan down at the bottom. So kind of neat. And Laserbeak, instead of getting like take deck tampos, just has the wings painted more colorfully and kind of highlights the circuitry there. So I don't know, they kind of went two different directions there. Kind of weird. But what we should really be looking at is Soundwave. This is an all-new alt mode. From the front, it looks very, very good. I gotta say, a pretty darn good recreation of the original design. You get the buttons here across the face. Nice, kind of bar going across to cover up kibble. You get your left and right speakers. And, obviously the door here. Cord, battery light. And then after that, though, it kind of starts falling apart. The top is not much to look at. The sides, it's just Soundwave shins here, jutting out, which kind of hurts the illusion. And the back is where it all kind of falls apart, unfortunately. So the back, you just get this big old block of like arms hanging off. His weapon storage just has these parts just oddly hanging off the back of a cassette deck. The two like battery weapons that normally are either like inside of a battery cover or flush up against him, now they're becoming these like weird little stanchions to help hold it up. Because unfortunately, if you don't have them on there, it wants to do this. Very back heavy. So it's not the best. I won't lie. I mean, it's cool. It's very cool to get a tape deck Soundwave at the Voyager scale, which puts them in scale with other toys, but it's not the best attempt at this alt mode that I've seen. Now, naturally, part of that is going to be because they took a toy that wasn't designed from the ground up to have this alt mode, and then retooled or reconfigured it to do so. So naturally, you're not going to have the most ideal result. But seeing as he is a tape deck, let's go ahead and show off that feature. Ravage and Laserbeak are the two cassettes that fit inside of this little door the best. The Rumble and Rat-Bat molds really don't work with this guy at all, unfortunately. But there you go. Probably the best one to put in here because it actually looks like a tape. Slide that out. Ravage is a little thicker. Laserbeak goes in a bit more smoothly. You can see that. Very colorful, at least. Very 80s sci-fi vibe. A little tech detail. Makes me think of Transformers the movie. Oop. Really captures that aesthetic. And yeah, I mean, not the most exciting alt mode. It's a cassette player. It's a block that you put things in it. But that's kind of the point, right? Going for that G1 authenticity. And now here we have the Siege counterpart to this new Netflix Soundwave, just to show you how radically different their alt modes are. I mean, there's really nothing the same about these at all. A good portion of the new Soundwave is all new tooling. I'd say maybe around 50% of it, maybe more. I don't know. It's quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, you can just see how much they changed for this release. This guy still has the vestigial, cassette door on the back of the spaceship, which doesn't make much sense. You can see they are the same part, though, just done up differently. This guy's got battle damage all over his, and he's like a dark gold. But yeah, I find it very interesting that they went and they retooled this guy so much that his alternate mode has a completely different configuration, different way of, moving his parts around, just overall completely different shape. In fact, it very much reminds me of the recently released Super Megatron, which was a very heavy retool of Titans Return Galvatron. And it did something similar where its alt modes were just a completely new setup from the Galvatron ones. So this is what I like to see. This is real retooling where you take something and just completely transform it into something else. So despite the fact that the cassette deck isn't the best rendition, it's still impressive just how much they were able to change this by, mixing up a few parts. Okay, and I want to do a quick group shot of the different tape deck Soundwaves that I own, ranging from the original Generation 1, the Masterpiece, the Titans Return one, and our new guy. The Titans Return is a bit offbeat because he's more of a beatbox than a tape recorder. but I think he's similar enough to, warrant inclusion here. Now, when it comes to which one of these pulls off the alt mode the best, again, I'm not really going to consider the Titan's Return one because it's kind of doing its own thing. But I will say, even for doing its own thing, it's not the best effort. You got like the obvious like waste going on here and everything. So I would say a close second will be the Masterpiece, which is a fantastic toy, by the way. It's one of my favorite Masterpiece figures. Back when Masterpiece was still good in my eyes. And does a really good job of capturing the original alt mode while kind of mixing that design with some cartoon inspiration. The biggest difference is that the proportion size of the door compared to the rest of the body is a lot smaller, and it was designed to actually be able to house the original cassettes. So it's the same size as this one, but with a bigger, chassis surrounding it. But yeah, this guy from like pretty much every angle looks amazing. Very realistic, very cool. On the back, it's mostly good. It's mostly flat and flush, but there is, of course, this gap here at the bottom that is a bit of an eyesore. So kind of loses points there. But in my opinion, the best still, after, 36 years, it's got to be this. It's got to be the original. It just looks the most like an actual cassette deck. I mean, it's got like the actual battery compartment with a little clip on it. It is the flattest by far, and yeah, it really just, it's a design that hasn't been perfectly emulated since. Now, of course, there's a trade-off to that. The robot mode has some pretty goofy proportions that wouldn't look very, cool or heroic. So that's kind of one of the fatal flaws of the Soundwave design, is that you can either get a really good cassette deck mode or you can get a really good robot mode. You're probably never going to get both of them perfect. I could be proven wrong. They might make a Masterpiece Soundwave 2.0 at some point. But given the current direction of Masterpiece, maybe it's best that they don't, or he'll have kibble hanging off him everywhere. All right, now I want to do a quick comparison with our cassettes and their Siege counterparts. So the left-hand side are the new ones, right-hand are the Siege. So comparing the alt modes of the Laserbeaks, the biggest difference is just the paint going on the wings here. It's about the only thing you can see that's really different between them at all. So, not a huge change. Say overall, I kind of like the new colorful version a little more. It's just more eye-catching, more interesting. With the Ravages, the new one's actually kind of plainer looking. It doesn't have quite as much of a color breakup. Most of it's down here, and then all up here is just like black. But obviously it's trying to do its own thing and look like an actual cassette tape, whereas this is supposed to be some sort of like a sci-fi shield type accessory. So I don't know, one's not really better or worse, just depends on what you're looking for. So yeah, let's go ahead. I'm gonna convert these guys to robot mode and we'll compare those. Okay, so we have these guys in their robot or beast modes, whatever you want to call it. So the Laserbeaks have, the largest amount of differences because they actually get some retooling here. You can see with this new one, he has got a whole new head, which makes it much more accurate to the cartoon design or original toy design. And I mean, it's completely different. They didn't just like give him eyes. The whole beak has been reshaped and just makes him look a lot more, sentient and drone-like. Again, there's nothing wrong with his Laserbeak. This is, specifically for if you want something that resembles his appearance in the, very beginning of the cartoon. But it is there. You can see the Decepticon symbol's been moved from his little backpack to his head also. So, yeah. Really neat between the two of them. The Ravages, they're, I don't know. They still managed to be pretty disappointing overall. So we got our new guy here. Here's the old one. The new Ravage actually ends up being less accurate in his robot mode due to, one, just the lack of like silver upper arms and all that. This guy kind of captures that a bit. He was designed, I think, more with the robot mode or, cat mode in mind. And also, they made the weird decision of giving this guy silver eyes as opposed to the normal red. So I don't know what's going on with that. And oh, you know what? I stand corrected. Their heads are retooled. Look at this. He's got an open mouth here. I didn't realize that. Yeah, they did retool the head. What do you know? So that's cool. There is a retooled head. I don't think one's really better than the other, though personally I kind of like the closed mouth. Yeah, I hate the silver eyes. That really kills it for me. So I actually think the Siege one's better. Now, neither of them makes a very good Ravage, honestly, because neither of them captures the lithe shape of the Ravage character. They're just like chunky cats, basically. I don't know why it's so hard for them to do him right here. I mean, they did Laserbeak fantastically. This is a very good little mini Laserbeak. The Ravages, they're just kind of bombing. Here we get to see a comparison with the original Generation 1 Ravage and Laserbeak and the Masterpiece versions as well. And you can see that, like I was saying, our new Laserbeak just hails much more closely to these designs than our Ravage does. This guy just really doesn't even look like the same character. So it's a good way of looking at how the designs have kind of evolved over the years. You go from, you know, old 80s toy to high-end version, and then like little bargain price point version. And, you know, it does show that scale and price do play a large factor in this. These guys are significantly smaller, which is going to make it more difficult to give them the complexity required to look anything like the original versions, because, I mean, the original cassettes, they're pretty big. They're good size. So, you know, it's one of those things where in order for them to scale with a very small sound wave, they had to be very small, which in turn hurts their ability to be accurate. And that's just kind of the unfortunate reality of it. Though I'm still convinced that they could have done a better job with Ravage. I mean, he doesn't have a very complicated design. In fact, we got this version of Ravage just, you know, not too long ago, a few years back. And yeah, it's bigger, but I mean, are you telling me they couldn't have done something to somewhat mimic this design? I mean, this guy hits pretty close to home. He very much resembles the Masterpiece. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like they could have done a lot better with that toy. Okay, now it's time to do our transformation. And since it's so different from the one that came before, it's worth doing again here. So, the first thing you want to do is go ahead and remove the accessories from the back. Just kind of set those aside. I'm going to lift this little flap up here. Fold these gray bits in, like so. Fold back down. You're going to pull the legs away from the sides. Like this. Rotate them this way. Pull this off. Might fight you a little bit. But these work very similarly to the Siege one, though these are different parts in the back. Same principle of operation though. Pull everything out, put the panels back in. Oh, I got the whole legs turned here. Not what I meant to do, but okay, that'll still work. Alright, go like that. Separate the arms and the shoulders from the back here. Plug those in. Flip his fists out. Rotate the arms. Like so. And you're going to spin around at the waist. Open up this panel. Pull the head out. Close that up. And there you have it. There is the robot mode for old Soundwave. A lot plainer looking than the Siege one, right? Not as much kibble and stuff going on, which, you know, is arguably a good thing. So the robot mode itself is mostly the same as the Siege toy. As far as, you know, overall appearance, a lot of the parts are actually new, and we'll get to that with a comparison. One thing I really don't like about this new thing. Look at this. He's got buttons on both sides. You got the, you know, robot mode ones, which are a little more streamlined, and then you have like the plain, realistic tape deck ones. But this looks silly, right? This, again, is why I don't really like faux transformation parts, because you usually just end up with having like extraneous kibble that doesn't make any sense. In this case, he's got 2 sets of buttons. If they had found a way to engineer this to, actually, what would have really been great is that there was a swivel in here, something that could like spin this around. I'd rather have like the gray showing on his backside than another set of buttons, because it just looks ridiculous. Why would he have that? And unlike certain toys like the Run Amok and Runabout mold that do a pretty good job of hiding the extra parts, I mean, his is just right there on his butt for everyone to see, so not good, not good. There's also something about his very wide, very flat back that kind of bothers me. Might just be a personal nitpick, but I don't know. Anyway, so if you want to attach his accessories, they go on the same way as the Siege toy. This one goes in here. By default, this gun goes there. And his more recognizable gun goes in this hand. Now, I noticed that the instructions for this toy, they tell you to, like, fold the gun out. Like, do it this way or something. Which, I guess you can. I don't know, that looks kind of weird to me. I always thought it made more sense like this. So, I don't know. I'm probably going to keep it this way. You guys can do what you want. Just looks more like an actual blaster this way. So, yeah, as far as articulation, he's got everything that the Siege version has. If anything, he's a little tighter, especially in the shoulders. Not too bad, but pretty noticeable. No loose joints, nothing like that. Everything still works the way it should. So, good action figure. Here he is alongside the Siege toy. And you can see there's a whole lot that's different about these two. I mean, the whole back is just completely redone. All different parts and everything. Doesn't have all that extra, backpack kibble, all that. He still maintains the landing gear. Now, it's kind of a double-edged sword. For one, it's definitely a vestigial kibble, right? Because why would a tape deck need landing gear? But on the flip side, they do help flesh out the back of the cassette deck mode. Fill in a gap there. So, I'd prefer if it wasn't there and they had found a better way to engineer this, but it's not the most intrusive thing. They hide pretty well along the backs of his forearms. The doors here, like I said, they are the same piece, just colored very differently from one another. All this, well, no, not even all this. I think these flaps are the same. The middle piece is not. This is flatter. The whole torso shell bit, that's all new. New shoulders. A lot about this is new. The forearms are the same. The legs are completely new pieces, pretty much all around. I think the feet are the same. And the heads are actually different too. They did retool his head to be a lot smoother. So there is a lot different about this guy despite the same overall appearance. Now, I don't know, in a way, I kind of prefer the look of the Siege one. I know a lot of people are like, oh, blasphemy, it's not G1, but like, I don't, something about him, his proportions seem better to me. His chest doesn't seem like overly wide. I don't know. I think it just kind of makes for a better looking character. This guy's just, I don't know, he's very wide and flat. Just doesn't really do it for me. Now, of course, a lot of people will be happy about the lack of battle damage paint because the Siege Soundwave is just absolutely riddled with it, and a lot of people really don't like that. And that's kind of a subjective thing, whether you like it or not. I think it fits for the setting that, Siege takes place in. I will say I still very much prefer the yellow eyes because of the very dark blue that both these characters use, which is actually even a little bit darker. So, again, the red doesn't make any sense. Or if they were going to go red, it should have been like a solid, bright red color. They went with this clear, which, I mean, you can barely see it unless maybe you're shining a bright light, like, right through it. So overall, I'm kind of mixed with how this turned out compared to the first one. Something about it just seems off to me. I can't quite place it. It's the proportions, I think. Just a little wonky. You'll also notice that, unfortunately, he's missing his red striping on the forearms, which is kind of a big trait of the character. So, that could have been remedied very easily with a little bit of paint apps. They kind of skimped there. And you know what? He's missing the bands on his little battery weapons too. Look at that. So, come on, guys. What are you doing here? You went through all this trouble retooling this guy to make him like more G1 accurate. You couldn't even get his standard red striping down. I feel like it's a pretty big failure on the creator's part. Okay, and here's a look at all of our Soundwaves in the robot modes. And you can see they all have pretty vastly different takes on the characters in terms of colors, proportions. Again, you got the original, Masterpiece, Titan's Return, Siege, and Netflix. Now these guys, like I said, they all kind of do their own thing. They try to achieve his classic look in different ways. The G1 toy, I mean, it is the base design. It's what, the cartoon design, the comic design, all that's based off of. So this toy is not really trying to be anything other than what it is, right? So as such, it's going to have the weirdest proportions. It's not trying to adhere to anything, really. The Masterpiece, in my opinion, is the greatest combination of cartoon proportions with toy details and even some more realistic detailing thrown in that wasn't present on either one. Titan's Return, it's getting a little dated by now. The toy is a retool of Blaster, so he's going to have some accuracy issues as it is. I mean, he doesn't even have the right gun for crying out loud. He's got Blaster's gun in blue, so, he was good for his time, and he's still a great figure, don't get me wrong. He's very underappreciated. But he does kind of start to pale in comparison to these newer entries. Your Siege guy, he goes for the toy colors and does his best to give some good proportions while working in some new details related to a very different alt mode. And he also has the ability to get that secret alt mode of the lamppost from the Generation 1 cartoon. Though it's really not accurate to how that actually looks, it's still kind of cool. And then we get our new guy here. And our new guy's in a weird place, because he's also a retool, like our leader class here, but he's a retool of himself, though it's himself with a different alt mode, and it creates a lot of weirdness. And even though I think he is a solid entry, he does still leave a bit to be desired in both modes. Both of them are pretty compromised by the whole thing. If you were to ask me, I would say that the Masterpiece toy is still the undisputed king of Soundwave toys. Now, I know it's kind of cheating because it's $100 and something toy. It's obviously going to have a higher budget. But when you look at some of the newer Masterpiece stuff, I think he tops even that. I mean, the biggest complaint I've heard about this guy is the little bit of kibble he has on the sides of his legs, which is really not very noticeable, kind of sits flat against his legs. Everything else, the tape deck mode, even though it's not perfect, it's really close. It has like that one gap in there. That's about it. And it's full of detail. And the robot mode is just beautiful. Leg kill or no leg kibble. Even the back here. Let me show you this. Look at the detailing on the back. That is just so nice. Such a good toy. So yeah. Masterpiece is still my favorite. I don't say that often, but yeah, it really is. So I don't know. What do you all think? Which one of these guys do you prefer over the others? Here's a quick shot of our toy with the RED figure, just so you can get an idea of how he actually compares to the cartoon proportions. Now, granted, I think the cartoon and, by extension, this RED figure, I think their proportions are a little too stylized, a little too exaggerated for something that could ever realistically turn into a cassette player. Though I will say, for what it is, very stylish looking. But you can see that obviously the chest is much wider, the head is smaller. He is kind of clunkier looking, but also stronger looking, so, some trade-offs there as far as these designs go. Alright, now we have our full 3-pack back on display. Now I will say, the standard partner for Soundwave to be included with is always Buzzsaw. That's how it was since the beginning. But over time, Laserbeak and Ravage have become his two most recognizable minions, so I understand their inclusion here. Though I really would have loved a Buzzsaw. Who knows, maybe they'll do another Soundwave Spy Patrol at some point, and they'll give us like Buzzsaw and, I don't know, Garboil, Howlback, something. They could be doing one with Enemy, because he did just pop up in the comics with the Siege design, so who knows, maybe they got something planned. Now, one thing I do want to show off real quick is if you bought the Centurion Drone accessory pack, you have a cage in which you can store Ravage. And if you're not aware, the cage is a reference to early Generation 1 episode in which the Autobots capture Ravage in a cage and kind of trick him into relaying some false intelligence to the Decepticons. So you just open it up, stick him in there. All right, so you can get him like that. Just have him hanging out, looking real angry, real sad that he's captured. Up to you if you want to do that. And for, I think, the last shot I'm going to do this video, here's Soundwave with all of his compatible little buddies. So you got the two he comes with. You get Frenzy, Rumble, Rat-Bat, and Wing Thing. And one thing worth pointing out is that this Soundwave does retain the little grooves on his forearm that allows me to knock everything over, for one. But also allows Laserbeak and any potential mold mates to mount onto his forearm via little clips. Now, just like the Siege one, it doesn't like to stay on very well, so just be aware of that. Kind of pops off. Oh, look at me just making a mess. Okay, so now that I've cleaned up my little mess there, all right, this is what we get. You get an Earth Mode Soundwave, who comes with two of his partners, arguably his most famous partners, and he has the ability to be grouped with several more. Now, overall, in order to pick up this whole thing, it's going to run you a pretty penny. It's going to look like about $70 total to get all this, assuming you can find them in stock still. So just be aware this isn't a cheap set to collect. However, if you are a pretty die-hard collector, you really like the G1 stuff, you really feel that you need an Earth Mode Soundwave, especially one that scales with the rest of your Chug collection or your War for Cybertron collection, yeah, this is kind of the route you got to go. This is easily the best Soundwave we've had at the Voyager price point when you take into consideration the Earth-based alt mode. There really aren't any other options out there for this scale. So it is up to you if you want to sink the money on it. If the last wave of Voyagers was any indication, these should, shelf warm pretty decently. So once it reaches saturation, it shouldn't be too hard to pick up. Now, as far as my final thoughts on this, again, I kind of just prefer the Siege Soundwave a little bit more, just because he's doing his own thing. So he's built from the ground up to do that, and he's not compromised in any way. This guy, I think both of his modes suffer pretty significantly because you are taking a toy that's meant to turn into a spaceship and reconfiguring it to turn into a rectangle, basically. There are going to be some oddities here. It's not a bad toy by any means, but again, the proportions are just a little wonky, and the whole push-button butt flap there, where it doesn't need to be, is just kind of an eyesore to me. Other than that, he's pretty solid. Again, I would have gone with yellow eyes, or at least bright red eyes, or done him in a brighter blue so that the eyes make sense, but that's just me. So now that I've said everything that I think about this toy, I want to know what you think of him. Do you plan on picking up this new Soundwave? Is he worth double dipping for if you already have the Siege one? Or did you hold off on Siege in the hopes that you would get this guy one day? And now that you have him, was he worth the wait? Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comment section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. And thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Netflix War for Cybertron Soundwave with Laserbeak and Ravage. And with all that said, I will see you next time.